Initially, I wanted to wait and drop this video next Monday to officially kick off this year's Pride Month, but then I figured I can instead finally get around to filming my What You Missed About Skips coming out scene instead, so be sure to keep an eye out for that next week. Today, however, I want to focus on Shane, on how Rose was able to create a space of safety and vulnerability for him to help lead him to his truth and the importance of being made to see that you aren't alone. Your queer experience isn't completely unique, and that there's a much needed comfort to be had in having that realization. Of course, before I start talking about Shane coming out scene, I will first like to give a big disclaimer about my What You Miss series. These are just my thoughts and opinions as I watch and rewatch the show, with occasional flashes of insight that pop in due to having read the books and being a lover of them as well. However, I am not about to proclaim myself as being the absolute authority on everything, since it's important we all remember that media is meant to be enjoyed, usually through our own interpretations and personal lenses. And as long as one isn't being bigoted or an absolute asshole, I'm usually more of a shrug. Everyone is entitled to their opinions, just like I am entitled to mine kind of girl. So thank you for giving me the space to yap, to continue to yap about this show. And whilst we're at it, I would like to say a big thank you to my lovely patrons and YouTube members whose support have been instrumental in helping me continue to make content, especially since I started doing this full time at the start of last year, which was the last time I was in paid employment. And a special shout out to Lina, Sherry, Holly, and Kat for their extra support. You get all the hearts and kisses to mwah. If you too would like to support me on Patreon or become a YouTube member to enjoy certain perks, maybe even get a shout out, the link to do so is in the description bar. And with that said and done, before we talk about Shane coming out to Rose, I do think it's important, imperative even, to look at what came before it, since it set the stage for the happenings that led to Rose sitting Shane down and leading him down the path that led to him finally coming out to himself and to Rose by extension. And I know the temptation is to go all the way back to the tuna melt scene and the meltdown that came afterwards, that saw Shane closing up the minute after I realized the feelings that had crept into he and Ilya's arrangement, which in turn saw him bailing and leaving Ilya's apartment with a quickness. However, I already have a What You Missed About the Tuna Melt Scene video. You can check that out. Now, I can choose to point to the tattoo or the thing she said club sequence, but I think I want to make that its own Everything You Missed video, because there are some nuggets in there that a lot of people missed. But instead, I think I would like to start with the morning afterwards. Now, we already established that the previous night was Shane and Rose's first sexual encounter that saw him looking like a man who was about to be marched to his own death at the thought of having sex with Rose, a woman. And when Shane wakes up the next morning, the scene already sets to him feeling and thus looking guilty. He's aware that the night was barely tolerable for him, and as such, the guilt that it didn't make it pleasant or pleasurable for Rose is something that is weighing on him. Rose immediately picks up on this, of course. She soothes him. It's no big deal. Is aware that it would have to be addressed, as it's not fair to Shane or to her for them to ignore what has happened, but she knows it isn't the right time. Nods her head in agreement to Shane, blaming it on the season and the pressure he's feeling, and suggests that they meet up in a week. It gives them both enough time to get over the events of the previous night, for Shane to be in a more relaxed mood, for Rose to be able to pick a suitable location and time for the conversation they're about to have. I think it's important for us to realize at this point that even before the coming out scene, Rose had already set out to make sure that everything was just right, so Shane can feel comfortable enough to talk to her without judgment, without feeling rushed, without feeling pressured. And I found that utterly incredible. Of course, we get to see the pressure that Shane has taken onto himself with his new relationship. The tweets and messages of fans talking about said relationship. I found it very interesting and a very purposeful choice for Jacob to show us this. This is the first time in the entire season that we get to see Shane looking outwards to what others were saying about him. In all the episodes that came before and the ones that followed, we never see Shane search for anything online. Hell, we know very much that Ilya stays abreast of such gossip and things. I'm still never going to get over him stubbing his toe because he's watching two show hosts talk about Shane and Rose's relationship. But yeah, that isn't Shane's style. His focus has always been on hockey or things he finds interesting, entertaining, like YouTube videos about unlikely friendships between animals, which we all know is a nod to the unlikely relationship between Shane and Ilya. But I digress. As I was saying, Shane isn't the type of person to follow gossip sites and look at their comments. His choice to do so when he's dating Rose is a way to visually represent just how a typical Shane is being, and how the source of that is his relationship with Rose, whereby Shane is tracking the gossip comments like he's tracking, say, the stats for a game. He's using it to measure his own success because he needs to know that even if he gave a less than stellar performance in the bedroom, at least public perception has him doing very well. I find it interesting, for example, that one of the comments mentions how Shane looks like he would carry Rose's bags, her hopes, her dreams, and her entire life. And then we see Shane doing just that, but with Ilya's bags when they go to the cottage. It's most likely not a conscious choice on his part, but I like to think of it as Jacob giving us a little bit of foreshadowing there, followed by a wink when Shane does it with Ilya, because the first is a commenter speaking on the assumption about Shane and Rose's relationship and how Shane would treat her based off of their perception of him being in love with her. And then you have Shane actually doing that, but for the man he loves, as he leads him into his sacred sanctuary, his space, his home. It's such a nice touch. And then, of course, I meet the announcers for the hockey podcast in the crease, talking about a historical change to the upcoming All Stars weekend in Tampa Bay that would see Shane and Ilya for the first time playing on the same team and even the same line. This is while Shane is working out prior to him meeting Rose. So afterwards, he heads to the restaurant to meet with her. Once again, like a lot of things that Jacob does with the show, it feels deliberate. To have that comment, that hint that Shane and Ilya are headed for a situation, a place where they get to be united for the first time in their professional career, where they get to be on the same line. It's a great way to hint that by the time Shane arrives at Tampa Bay, he and Ilya would be headed for a situation in their relationship where they would finally, for the first time in their sexual and romantic relationship that's lasted as long as their professional one, for the first time, they will finally get to be on the same page. But for them to get to that point, Shane has to admit the truth of who he is and what he feels first. Ends the conversation with Rose, which the man in Crease talk segues into very brilliantly well. Anyway, Shane arrives. Rose is waiting for him. She's chosen a seat, soft lighting, privacy so that Shane can feel comfortable. It's a great way to hint at how well she knows him, yet more proof that those who love Shane are aware of what he needs and meet said needs in a way that doesn't overwhelm him. We've seen this with Hayden when he asks him over to dinner for the first time, with Ilya for their first time, and now we're seeing it with Rose. Shout out to the soft lights because it makes everything so peaceful and beautiful. Now Rose starts off by calling Shane cute. It's such a great way to ease him into things, an affirmation that she thinks is attractive, that she considers it important for him to know this since it ties back to the conversation she's about to have with him. And of course, she uses this to bring up the fact that Miles is jealous of her because, she's with Shane and Miles wishes that he were with Shane. It's her testing the waters, trying to see where the best place is for her to launch her line of questioning from. If she can start at the midpoint with the attraction already noticed by Shane, or if she has to go to the very beginning to see if Shane had ever even noticed the attention of another man before. I know some people might think that it's a bit of a stretch, but I think it's important for us to take note of the fact that just because we've been following Shane and Ilya's relationship all along, doesn't mean that Rose has access to that information. She is jumping in blind and trying to figure out the best way to ascertain what Shane has discovered or admitted to himself and where she can go from there. And I think that it's incredible. But back to Rose and Shane, she's aware that her goal is not to sideline him. So she's still being careful. She asks as if Shane is surprised that Miles is gay, yet another subtle way of hinting to Shane about her being cool and comfortable with Miles's sexuality and Miles being open and honest about it to her. She's getting Shane to see that it isn't a big deal, that she's willing to create that safe space for him as well. And to that effect, she takes things a bit further by stating that a lot of actors are gay, making it a point to let Shane know that he isn't alone, that there are others like him out there, and that just like him, some of them have chosen to keep this part of themselves and their sexuality private, and there's nothing wrong with that. So now she's brought up gay men in her world and sphere, so she follows it up by asking if there are any gay hockey players, then cuts in before Shane gets the chance to speak by affirming that, of course, there are gay hockey players. Once again, she's letting Shane know that there is a community out there for him present whenever he is ready, and then follows it up by asking if there are any out hockey players. Side note, I think it's a brilliant bit of script writing and directing that has the episode start with Rose asking this question, only for that same episode to end with Scott publicly kissing Kip after winning the cup, effectively becoming the first out hockey player, like Rose had asked Shane about at the start of the episode. Absolutely brilliant bit of storytelling right there, practically serendipitous. Now, Shane responds about there most likely being gay players, but none that have said it publicly. Rose realizes that she isn't going about things the right way. That the subtlety she's going for, which she assumed Shane would have preferred, seems to be going over his head at the moment. And so she decides to be a bit more upfront about what she's trying to say. So she starts by affirming that she really likes him, i.e., just as when she had mentioned earlier that she thinks he's cute. She finds him physically attractive, to which Shane says he likes her too. But you can see in the way she breathes out that she knows that they aren't using the word like in the same way. And so she tries to clarify, says she doesn't think she does it. She quite does it for him. And when Shane tries to deny it, she asks further clarifying questions. So she knows Shane likes talking to her, but does he like kissing her, for example? And the speed with which he says, sure, not in the affirmative certainty that indicates desire, but like he's parroting what is expected of him to say in that moment, which she immediately notices, sticks out to her. And we can see that Shane notices that too. And so, once again, because he's still operating from the worry and fear of him doing things wrong and operating outside of what is expected of him, immediately he starts to apologize. And that is when Rose cuts in and tells him that there's no need for him to apologize, and instead brings the conversation back around and mentioning that she thinks maybe it would rather be kissing, say, Miles instead. Now, as the audience, we see the fear that instantly crosses Shane's face. It's like he's back again in that room, that space with Ilya after the tuna melt scene, being forced to address something he would rather keep buried. And whilst with Ilya, Shane isn't in the space to address that because his identity as a gay man is tied to his attraction to Ilya Rozanov in that moment, which heightens everything for him. With Rose, it's a bit different, and Rose immediately starts to soothe Shane because remember, there's no attraction there to heighten everything. So at this point, Shane continues that yes, he likes being with her. He likes talking to her, kissing her. The sex stuff he knows is a problem. And that is, of course, when Rose cuts in that no, it's not a problem. It's important for her to make it clear to Shane in that moment because she knows how he can get into his own head. And she needs him to be aware that his lack of desire for her as a woman is not a problem. A problem can be fixed. A problem implies that something is wrong with either the situation or the person. This isn't the case. This isn't something that needs fixing. It just is. It's like a square peg that can't and shouldn't be forced into a round hole. Now, the analogy is gross to her, but what she means to say is that she doesn't think they fit, and it's okay that they don't fit because the expectation that they should fit is in itself not right, since people and desire and the presence or lack of it just is. And we can see Shane in real time panic about what all this means, what is being left unsaid, what he finally has to come to terms with. And Rose can see it too. But she doesn't want to burden her friend and insists that he doesn't owe her any explanation. And when Shane says that he feels like he owes her one, she insists that he doesn't. Now, I do think as well that it helps that at this point they've only been dating for a couple of weeks, really. Now, if they had been dating for years, for example, that is a whole other conversation that would have, I think, a bit more drama to it. Now, Rose then asks if Shane has ever been with another guy, at which point Shane flashes to Ilya in the CCM shoot showers. After they are done, their eyes meeting and everything that passes through them as he watches Ilya, and Ilya does the same, and Shane nods. Next, she asks, has he ever told anyone that before? Shane shakes his head. Was it different with a guy? He flashes to the soft kiss they had after their first time on the stairwell before Ilya has to leave weeks before they head to Sochi for the Olympics. He nods, affirms it with an, of course. Was it better? He flashes back to their first All Stars weekend and how he pounces on Ilya the minute the door opens like he's been starved. Like the time apart has set the desperation ablaze in his veins, and he acquiesces that yes, it was better. I found it interesting, really, that that was the thought, the image, the visual that popped into his head when Rose asks that particular question. His answer to if it was better, because of course it's better. With Ilya, it feels like he can barely catch his breath. Every moment they have together is one that leaves Shane intoxicated, wanting more, desperate, and aching, and wanting to savor it because they would be separated for months afterwards. It's a brilliant bit of visual storytelling, the individual clips used in those responses. A silent question of Ilya's desire for Shane that we had gotten back in the tuna melt scene, a desire that had sent Shane running, and now we see an echo of a response to just how desperate Shane is for him as well, for their connection. And it's just utterly brilliant. But back to Shane and Rose. Shane admits that he prefers to be the hole rather than the peg, which they both laugh at. To which Rose says that that's the best thing any of her gay boyfriends have ever told her. Once again, affirming for Shane that he is not alone in this. Not in him being gay, not in him trying to figure out. Not in him trying to figure himself out, not in him trying to see if he can date women, not in him choosing to stay in the closet at the moment. 80% of her boyfriends have left her for other guys after all. It's a way of telling him not to sweat it. He's not alone in this. There are others quite like him. And to further drive home the point, the fact that there are no hard feelings, that she's rooting for his happiness. She suggests he follows Miles on Instagram and Shane turns that down, that he still has stuff he wants to work through. We, of course, know this is him thinking about he and Ilya's relationship, how he left it off, and his plans to salvage it. And she affirms for Shane that this secret of his is one that she fully intends to keep. After they are done with dinner, she demands that they be real best friends because she understands how lonely it must be for him, keeping such a crucial piece of himself hidden away from others. And she wants him to know that he has her in his corner for support. Hell, she is going to take things a step further and text him. She's going to maintain that connection because she knows she would rather hold things in without letting anyone be aware of what's going on with him. And she has decided that she wouldn't let that happen. That even amidst the busyness of their life together, Shane with his games and she with her shoots, she would still make an active, conscientious choice to be in his life because he's worth it. His friendship is worth it. And that just gets me in the gut. I repeat, I love this scene so bloody much, but of course, these are just my thoughts. I would as always love to hear yours. Whether or not you agree with me, please share them in the comments. Like this video, however, if you've watched this far and haven't done so yet, but enjoyed anything of what I had to say, share it so others can find my channel as well. Or you can check out my gaming or ASMR channels if they sound like something you might be interested in. I have them both linked in the description bar. I will see you tomorrow with a new video. Until then, do remember, obsessing over the things you love, perfectly valid coping mechanism.